Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am Crista Cowan. I am the corporate genealogist at Ancestry, and today is Takeover Day, which means that this Facebook Live is streaming live to the Ancestry Facebook page, just like I do every other Tuesday week, every other Tuesday at the same time. But we are also this week streaming live to the RootsTech Facebook page, to the Family Search YouTube page, and I think maybe over on an X account somewhere. So wherever you are joining us live, welcome. I am so glad you are here. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Crista Cowan. I'm the corporate genealogist at Ancestry, and we are one of the platinum sponsors for RootsTech. And so I thought that I would just share with you a few things today. And if you are watching this live, I hope you will participate in the comments because I've got some questions for you, some things I would love to know. Now, if you've been following along on Instagram today, and if you're not, why aren't you following me and or RootsTech over on Instagram? If you've been following along on Instagram today, you know that December is kind of a little cozy family history month for me. So October is National Family History Month, and I always do a big challenge with my community. And then November is my birthday, and I kind of spend a lot of time doing things with my family and reflecting a lot on my life. But December is when I really just think about family history in a different way. And maybe it's because I get nostalgic for time with my family, or maybe it's because the weather outside is cold and there's not a lot of other things to distract me. Or maybe it's just because I'm thinking ahead to the next year. I've just come off my birthday month planning and goal setting. And so now I really want to get specific about family history. So there are 3 things that I do every December that I thought I would share with you today. And I would love to hear from you about your answers to these 3 questions that I ask myself. So the first question I ask myself, or the first thing that I usually reflect on at this time of the year, is what my family history successes have been from this past year. Now, I will share a couple of mine with you, but before I do, I would love it if in the comments you would share yours with me. So if you had to think about your biggest family history success of the past year, let me know what it was. Was it maybe a brick wall that you broke through, or a DNA match that you were able to figure out, or a family reunion that you held? Like, if you had to define family history success, what was your biggest success from this past year? So while you are typing out your answers in the chat, I would love to share just a couple of brief ones from my own life with you. So one of them actually just happened. So I have an ancestral couple, James Palmer and Sarah Carr. And James and Sarah were from Virginia, and then they moved their family to Kentucky, and then their family moved to Illinois. And as far as I knew, they only had 9 children. And those 9 children, I thought I had pretty well documented. I've got DNA matches that connect to them. I've got documentation about them. But the one thing that I was a little unsure about was exactly when James died. Now, I know that when James's father, Elijah, wrote his will in 1839, he listed the heirs of my son, James Palmer, deceased. So I knew James was dead at least by 1839. So I've been looking for his will, trying to pinpoint when he died, still haven't found that. So that is not my family history success. But I recently uncovered with my dad. So my dad and I get together every Sunday night over FaceTime, and we do family history together. We work on our DNA matches specifically, trying to figure out the puzzle of how they all fit together. And so my dad and I were working on our DNA matches, and we popped up one Ancestry DNA match, and that match was connected through Ancestry through lines to James Palmer and Sarah Carr through a daughter named Mary. The problem is I already had a Mary, and I had her married to someone else entirely different. Now, the Mary I had in my family tree, I had her listed as Mary Melvina Palmer, married to a man named Peter Renfro. And I had DNA matches that connected me to them. I had evidence, I had documents that I had connected them to that family. She followed the same migration pattern as the rest of them. I knew she was part of this family. But now I have this other Mary, and her husband's name is John Renfro. What on earth is happening? So here is the big success that I have found. And this has been repeated success that I have had this year. And that is thanks to Family Search full text search. If you haven't used full text search yet on Family Search, I would highly encourage you to try it out. If you go to the RootsTech website, you can find videos from last year's RootsTech, and I think even the year before, there might be a couple walking you through how to use it. But full text search, I pulled it up and I was going to do a search for James Palmer to see if I could find his will. But his name is James Palmer. And it's so common. And so I thought, I wonder if one of his kids has a more unique name that I could search. And so I searched the more unique name of Granville Palmer, and up popped a shorter, much shorter list of search results. And as I started going through those search results, I started looking in places they had lived. Wayne County, Illinois, Kentucky, I think it was Hart County, Kentucky, maybe, and then all the way back to Halifax County, Virginia. And sure enough, in Halifax County, Virginia, in 1847, I found Granville Palmer in full text search on Family Search, listed on a deed. But that wasn't all. He was listed on a deed selling property that he and all of his siblings had inherited from their grandfather, because remember, their dad died before Grandpa wrote his will, and it listed every one of the children. And it didn't just list the children. It listed Granville Palmer, and then it listed Benjamin Kerr and his wife, Nancy. Those are my great-great-grandparents. And then it listed Melvina Palmer. Actually, what it listed was Peter Renfro and his wife, Melvina. And then it listed Sarah, David Hall and his wife, Sarah. And then it listed John Renfro and his wife, Mary. So somewhere along the line, I had decided that Mary and Melvina were the same person and that they were married to Peter Renfro, when in fact, Mary and Melvina were sisters married to John Renfro and Peter Renfro, who were first cousins to each other. And full text search helped me uncover that, helped me clean up the little mess I had made in my family tree. And then all of a sudden, these other DNA matches started making a lot more sense. And that night, my dad and I were able to attach, I think, about 10 DNA matches who were descendants of Mary and John to our family tree because of that record that we found, that deed from 1847 when they were selling the property that their grandfather left them in 1842 when he died, from a will written in 1839. And now here we are with the names of every one of the children in that family and their spouses, and where some of them lived, because none of them still lived in Halifax County. So it was pretty amazing to be able to make that discovery. And I love family history successes like that. Things that aren't necessarily a brick wall, but things that clean up messes I've made in my own family tree from sloppy research or research that I just didn't know wasn't right, because I've been doing this a long time and I continue to learn new things as I continue on my family history journey. So that is one of my successes from this past year. I'm looking through the comments that are flying in here. So many of you have had some success in your family history this year. Somebody found a friend's biological parents. I love that when we help each other with DNA or family tree results. Belle has found deeds to properties her family has owned. Yvette has broken through a brick wall. She found a source to verify the identity of her great-great-great-grandfather. Shalama found a paternal grandfather's obituary and death and probate records from a paternal great-grandmother. Oh, Justin found his great grandmother's twin sister and met her granddaughter. I love that. That is actually one of my other family history successes from this year. One of the things that I love is meeting family members, especially family members who either have stories and pictures that I don't have, or who want stories and pictures that I have to share that they didn't have. And so earlier this year, I had the opportunity to take one of my nibblings to New Orleans. Every time one of them turns 13, I take them on a Aunt Crista trip anywhere in the US that they want to go. He picked New Orleans. I was so excited. Now, he picked it because of the music and the food and the opportunity to see alligators. And so we went to New Orleans and we did all of those things. But we also spent several hours one Saturday afternoon with one of my dad's second cousins. Now, these women are amazing women that I have developed a really lovely friendship and relationship with over the last few years since I found them. They are the children of my grandfather's first cousins. And as far as we know, my grandpa only met his first cousins once in his whole life. And he talked to me several times about how much he wanted to get to know them and to find them before he died. And I wasn't able to find them before he died. But I kept that promise and I found them several years ago and have made many trips to New Orleans where we have shared family history information. As a matter of fact, I have a podcast. It's called Stories That Live in Us. And when I launched that podcast a year and a half ago, episode 1 is all about that promise to my grandpa and the whole story of how I found them, if you want to go listen to that. The opportunity that I had when I first met them, they had pictures, I had pictures, they had stories, I had stories. And I've been back and forth several times, but this particular trip this year with this particular nephew, we were there and some of the cousins that I had never met before came. And I've been Facebook friends with them all. And so I felt like I knew them and they felt like they knew me. But one of them walked in and she had 2 giant photo albums. And in those photo albums were pictures of my great grandparents that I had never seen before. And so I just am so appreciative of the success that I've had in maintaining these relationships and the willingness that they've had to maintain these relationships and to continue to meet new family and connect with new family in that particular way. So yes, so I love that you had the opportunity, Justin, to meet your great-grandmother's twin sister's granddaughter. I think that that's so important. So many more of you are sharing the things that you've learned, and I love that, the successes that you've had. I think that is one of the things that keeps us going in family history is these little successes. So as I look forward to 2026, the second thing that I always do in the month of December is I think about what my family history goals are for the next year. Now, we all know how easy it is to get distracted by a family history rabbit hole, and I follow some of those trails all the way. But I also kind of like to have some overarching goals just to kind of keep me on track. Or so when I sit down to work on my family tree, I have an idea of what I want to focus on. So I have the number one goal on my list is always the same. It's about a very specific brick wall in my family tree. That brick wall is my John O'Brien brick wall. Could you get a more common Irish name? And he has been a brick wall in our family for 40 years. And he was very inconsistent about how old he was. He was very inconsistent about where he was born. But I've been very slowly chipping away at his life. I literally just recently found him in the 1860 census. I knew he had enlisted in the Civil War and where, and I found him in a neighboring county, and I'm like 90% certain it's him. And that gives us some additional evidence to trace and track down. But I am specifically looking to target test, to do some target DNA testing with some other descendants of his to see if that can't help us filter our DNA matches a little more closely so that we know what cluster of DNA matches we should be focused on to help identify who John's parents are. So that is my number one goal still and forever until I solve it, which is break down that John O'Brien brick wall and figure out when and where he was born and who his parents are. Now, my second genealogical goal for the year is I have been chasing the descendants of a particular couple in my family tree. As a matter of fact, I'm just getting ready to record another episode of my podcast this afternoon. We are doing a whole series right now on America 250. So next year, July 4th, 2026, is the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And so on my podcast this season, what we've been doing is we've been telling a family history story from each of the 50 states, one state a week. We started with Alaska and Hawaii, and we're working our way down to Delaware in reverse order of when they became a state. And so I'll be recording an episode this afternoon about this particular matrilineal line of my family tree, my mother's 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 mother, and how she ended up in Arkansas. And that family in particular, she was one of either 9 or 11 or 13 siblings, depending on what information you believe. And so my goal for next year is to have a definitive list of who the children are in that family and make sure I've got all of them well documented. And if I can get DNA matches to each of them, all the better. So those are just two of my family history goals for next year. So here's what I would love to hear from you. Whether you're watching this live on Facebook or YouTube or X, whether you are watching a recording of this after the fact, in the chat or the comments, would you just let me know if you've even thought about it, or if this is your opportunity to think about it, what your family history goals are for 2026. Is there a specific thing you want to find or solve or work on over the course of this next year? And while you are typing that out, let me tell you about the third thing that I do in the month of December. So December is the month where I have to look forward to 2026 and make sure that I've got everything well planned, because I have a lot going on in my life. I work a full-time job at Ancestry. I do this podcast on the side. I own a business, Family Chart Masters, where we print family tree charts, and I have some staff that do the design work and the printing. I have a church calling and responsibility. And most importantly, I am an aunt and a sister and a daughter, and just cherish and value those relationships and want to make sure that I continue pouring into those. And so with all of this stuff going on in my life, I have to make sure that my calendar gets filled up with the big rocks first. Do you know about big rocks? Big rocks are about how if you have a jar and you want to fill it, you always want to put in the big rocks first. Because if you put in the sand first, then there's not room for the big rocks. So you always want to put in the big rocks first, and then you can put in the pebbles, and then you can pour in the sand, and it will kind of fill in all the spaces around it. And then sometimes you can even fill it up with a little bit of water. But the idea is if you put the big rocks in first, everything fits. But if you don't put those big rocks in first, then everything doesn't fit. And so I've been looking at my big rocks for 2026. A couple of those big rocks include a couple of trips for some of the nibblings. I've got, I think, 2 that are possibly coming up. I've got a college graduation for one of the nibblings. I've got a possible wedding for one of the nibblings. I've got a family trip that I want to take. So those are kind of my big rocks. And then I have to start fitting in the work big rocks. And one of those work big rocks is RootsTech. So RootsTech is March 5th, 6th, and 7th this next year, and I will be there. Again, Ancestry is a platinum sponsor for RootsTech, and that whole week gets taken up with all sorts of RootsTech activities. Ancestry will be there. I will be on the main stage. Every year I get to present the What's New at Ancestry presentation, and I'm so excited to do that. But I also am involved right now in all the planning leading up to RootsTech here at Ancestry. And the two things that we're talking about a lot right now are storytelling and America 250. So storytelling specifically is about all the discoveries that we're making, like the family trees that we're building and the photos we're collecting and the DNA matches we're uncovering. They're all amazing. But how do we pass the stories on to the next generation? How do we make sure that that information is discovered and preserved and shared in a way that engages people and captures their attention? That's really what my podcast is all about, is how to tell those stories. I'm modeling that behavior so that people can learn how to be better storytellers. But it's something that Ancestry has provided a lot of tools and resources to do. So we'll be talking a little bit about that at RootsTech. We're going to have a big booth at RootsTech where you can come and visit us, and I will be there. I do a community meetup for my community on Wednesday night before RootsTech officially kicks off. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of the conference, you can find me teaching classes or in the exhibit hall, and I would love to meet you. So if you are planning on coming in person, please, please, please come and find me. I would love to meet you and hug you and hear your stories in person. If you're watching virtually still, follow along. I will be, like I said, on the main stage once. I'll have a couple of other presentations. I'll be on the Ancestry Facebook page at the end of every day of RootsTech, giving you kind of a recap for those of you who can't be there in person, or even for those of you who are there in person and can't get everywhere to see all the things. So RootsTech is a big rock in my calendar. The other big rock in my calendar for next year is the National Genealogical Society's annual conference. That's going to be held in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it's going to be May 28th through 30th. Fort Wayne, Indiana is the home of the Allen County Public Library, which, after the Family Search Library, is the second largest genealogical library in the world and has some incredible resources. And so that's going to be a big conference. And then the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society's annual conference is typically in the fall. The International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies annual conference is usually in the summer, though it's going to be virtual this year. So those are my big genealogy conference rocks that I've had to work into my 2026 schedule. And that's important because I want to make sure that I've got that time blocked off, that I understand, where I need to be, when I need to be there, that I can save up money to buy all the books and charts and things that I want to buy at the conferences. And so planning that in December becomes a really important part of my scheduling. And then once I get those big rocks in, family time and work trips, then I can start to schedule around that. And one of the next things that goes on my schedule is the Ancestry virtual events. So every Wednesday I show up and teach something about Ancestry. You can learn more about that at ancestry.com/education. That's our education portal. You'll see some of our past virtual events. You can register for the upcoming events. Those events are free, but you do need to register if you want to attend live on Zoom with me. Otherwise, we just post the videos on the Ancestry YouTube channel after the fact. So learning and continuing to educate myself and continuing to provide educational opportunities for all of you on your family history journey is a really big goal that I have for 2026 and part of the planning that I do. How do I get more involved in creating and curating communities of people to gather, or guiding them to communities that already exist? And then how do I provide them with that education? So those are the three things I do in December. I review my family history successes. I think about and write down what I want my 2026 family history goals to be. And then I plan out kind of those big rocks of family time as well as genealogy conferences as I think about how I want to participate in both leading and learning in the genealogy education space. And RootsTech is a great way to do that. So if you haven't yet thought about coming to RootsTech, I hope that you will. You can learn more at rootstech.org. and you can register there. I think registration is already open, so if you're going to come in person, please make plans to do that. If you can only participate virtual, that is also worth your time, but I would carve it out on your calendar. Make sure you've got those big rocks written down. So that is all I have for you today. I'm excited to read through your comments, learn more about what your family history goals are for 2026 so that I can continue to tailor our every other Tuesday Facebook Live get-togethers on the Ancestry Facebook page and our Wednesday virtual events to meet you where you are and help you meet those family history goals. Until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.